ABC Thursdays.
Welcome back.
Grey's Anatomy is all new.
Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?
The drama going down.
Bungee jumping from a bridge, his cord snapped.
We need all hands on deck.
Is unbelievable.
You think you're God's gift to this hospital? You're just another doctor.
My relationship with Catherine is complicated.
I'm gonna sue you.
Your lawyers know where to find me.
You're unbelievable.
Grey's Anatomy. All new Thursdays, 10/9 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so LifeLock wants to remind you to update your passwords. Using the same password across multiple accounts makes you vulnerable to cybercriminals. For comprehensive identity theft protection, let LifeLock alert you to anything suspicious and fix any issues. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Guys bonus show as the special extra edition of a discussion of civil and not polite, I don't know, I suppose most of the time, a discussion of politics and political issues. And on our bonus show, we tend to wade into issues news we could not cover in the regular show. And it also kind of gets a little far afield because by this time we're maybe a little bit punchy. But our first story is the Trump civil suit. If you recall, a New York court found Trump liable for $480 million in a civil fraud judgment against him. Trump appealed, subject to a $170 million bond. And they had the oral arguments on this case just last week. And the three-member panel seemed skeptical of both the conviction and the damages. One of the justice, they call them justices at the appellate level of New York, said, "I'm sorry, but what's being described sounds an awful lot like a potential commercial dispute between private actors." Another justice said that indicated there has to be some limitation on what the attorney general can do in interfering in these private transactions where people don't claim harm. And as a refresher, this, of course, the conviction had to do with Trump allegedly inflating values of his business in order to get better loan conditions. The issue, though, was, of course, all the loans were paid back. Everyone went away happy, except Letitia James, New York's attorney general, who sought to prosecute Trump on this. Although she's happy for the moment, we'll see how it turns out on appeal. But throughout this, Trump supporters and I think legal observers in general had noted that this case was unusual in that there was no party that actually suffered any harm. And the magnitude of the fine of an organization getting hit with this big of a chunk, all in almost all cases, usually punitive damages, these additional damages are premised on the initial damage done and are sort of a percentage or multiplier of them. But in this case, no actual damages. So this seems to be a new little good upwind. What's the word I'm looking for, Justin? I've lost it. But anyway,
I was going to say good news, but that's not particularly evocative.
Yeah, I know. I'm always looking for something better, but let's leave it at that. It is seemingly good news for Trump. Although I'll put in two caveats. One is that you can never necessarily determine what a court of appeals is thinking just based on their questions. Good panels will ask tough questions to both sides. So there's always that caveat. That said, times you don't need a weatherman to tell which way the wind blows. The other caveat is when and if, well, not if, but when the court issues its decision, my sense is it'll probably be after the election. Not for sure, obviously, but I would say most likely they would not issue an opinion until after the election. So it's not as if Trump could suddenly claim I've been exonerated, so forth, based on that. But I've been wrong before. Justin, your thoughts?
So what's the typical, I know you don't practice in New York, but what would a typical timeline on something like that be? Because, I mean, we're down to, what are we, like 40 days before the election?
Yeah, so even
if it's not for strategic purposes of not wanting to weigh
so
in.
in my world, in appellate law, which I do a fair amount of, and I do it around the country, but, mostly Ohio, I would say the typical time from an oral argument in a court of appeals decision to a court of appeals to a decision is probably in the range of, I don't know, 6 weeks at the earliest, usually more 8 to 12 weeks. It's more that 2-3 month kind of range.
Right.
Again, depends on the complexity of the case. This one would be pretty complex.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
This strikes me, setting aside the people involved, this strikes me as something fairly intricate and maybe a little.
Yeah, and high stakes, and that you want to get it right. And I think if I'm the court, I want to avoid any sort of claim that, issuing the opinion too quickly, too soon, is some sort of political meddling right before the election.
But it seems like on a practical level, like it would, if they wanted
probably
to meddle,
wouldn't.
they'd have to work really hard to make that happen.
Exactly. That's my sense of things. Again, I've been wrong before. I haven't dug into all the briefs here, but just because of this is an unprecedented case. The court even said, like, look, we can't really find anything of any other time when someone's been brought up on charges of fraud when no one's lost any money. I think that makes those cases are tougher to decide.
Sure.
Just because you can't just look back and say clearly, as our decision in Smith versus Jones says, here's the law, because it is sort of a neither fish nor fowl. You've got to do sort of a second level of, based on all our decisions, although we haven't looked at this question exactly, here's why we're coming out where we're coming out. So I would take the over in terms of when the opinion comes out.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was my sense. It's odd that they're taking it up. Not odd that they're taking it up now. I mean, I guess this is just probably what would happen. But
I would say looking at this, because there's always so much weird suspect stuff anytime Trump's involved, right? Of that the judges are moving the cases too fast or too slow or something like that.
Sure. On
this one, I can tell you, it looks like these are sort of typical type deadlines.
That's what I was just going to say. You know, with the caveat that I'm only genetically a lawyer and not an actual lawyer. This doesn't feel odd to me, like, in the way that like the Florida cases do, for example, with the timeline on those. So, and it does. I think this presents kind of that challenge. I mean, it's got to be hard to be a court in these circumstances where, you've got, the potential electoral consequences hanging in the balance, and you don't want to, don't want to weigh in on those, and don't want to have an impact. But, at the same time, you have to act, and so, it's, with all of these things, I mean, at least from the court's perspective, I mean, given that they've been brought and whatnot, I mean, at some point you have to weigh in, and I don't think that, being a presidential candidate is a get out of trial free card, or anything. Yeah. But
and even this one might be, you could say, a little bit easier because there are no like immunity questions or anything here. The defendant is sort of the Trump business administration, company, right? It's not a criminal case. It's just a civil case. I say just a civil case. It's a, $780 million civil case.
That's couch change.
But again, they're not looking at the issues of, are you going to put a presidential candidate or former president in jail or anything that's related to official duties in office. This is all Trump business stuff done outside of office. So that does make it a little bit easier, but still, I think the court, one, will take its time to get it right, and two, to avoid any hint of saying, we're trying to make a political point with Donald Trump.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, So LifeLock wants to remind you to update your passwords. Using the same password across multiple accounts makes you vulnerable to cybercriminals. For comprehensive identity theft protection, let LifeLock alert you to anything suspicious and fix any issues. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
So I'm kind of curious with your thoughts. Again, this is where I don't know the law so well, but this is clearly a novel application of the statutes.
Yeah.
How far afield is this? I mean, I guess my basic sense here is that there certainly feels like there's something wrong, like something inappropriate happened.
Yeah, well, I would say in most cases, these types of things, it's usually as the one justice noted, if the bank felt that the Trump organization had defrauded it by artificially inflating property values, then the bank should have sued, right? It would be typically a private dispute.
And the crux of civil law is that it's parties suing each other rather than the government suing.
Yeah, and typically, and I don't have familiarity with this New York statute off the top of my head, but a lot of times the way this works is if you're alleging this type of public fraud or public fraud to an institution, you sort of notify the attorney general. The attorney general is like a party to be notified, and then the attorney general can join to say, yes, this is this type of fraud is a threat to consumers, citizens, et cetera. So we're weighing in as well and bringing our civil fraud charges. And again, I don't know whether that New York statute requires the attorney general to come in or just is optional or requires notice to the AG. But I would say that's the way most of these statutes work. And in a lot of cases, attorney generals might just say, well, hey, look, this looks like a private dispute between you guys. So, have at it. The bigger part of this is, of course, though, the lack of damages is people typically don't sue or attorney generals don't spend state resources to go after someone when there's been no loss.
Mm-hmm.
So those are sort of the novel issues. And I'd say in most jurisdictions, in most cases, you can say, well, look, if there's no damages, there's no lawsuit. Now, the statute allows for sort of, the court, the government in seeking this to, assess these fines. So there is that piece of it. But
my understanding was the law was a slightly odd one, was sort of the way it had been portrayed in terms of standing. But
yeah, well, this is a weird.
Well, it's a weird situation, but that you could get it in under this law because the law itself was a little unusual, like as far as civil law goes, maybe. But I think look, it does empower the attorney general to bring these kind of claims. Sure, it's just the unusual part is that there's not somebody else making the claim.
Exactly, yeah, that there's no damage being done, and it sort of seems like a political hunting license, if you will, of it puts the attorney general's office as sort of the position of sort of a, I don't know, free range out there, just kind of policing various private transactions where no one's complaining. And that's sort of weird and troubling, and I think subject to abuse. And I think there's some abuse here, not some abuse. I think there's a lot of abuse here, particularly when, you have a state attorney general who campaigned on the promise of, I'm going to prosecute Donald Trump because I know you don't like him. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the decision ought to be overturned, probably on a variety of grounds. But one, because, look, this isn't really, I think no damages, no claim. It would be the biggest argument. And second, even if there is a claim that the damages assessed, the fine assessed is well outside anything recognizable or even constitutional for the conduct alleged, which everybody agrees didn't result in any harm. So
we hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,